Johannesburg was still half asleep when the phone began to ring. Not the loud kind of ringing, just that thin, almost apologetic vibration on a wooden bedside table. 4:17 a.m. The city outside was quiet, in the way only very early mornings can be. No traffic yet, no birds brave enough to test the light. A single lamp still on in a living room somewhere. A kettle that hadn't been switched off. A window cracked open to let the last of the summer air drift in. And then the message. Short, careful. As if even words were afraid to take up too much space. By sunrise, it had already moved through the city. Not loudly. Not with headlines screaming. It passed from screen to screen, from whisper to whisper. People reading it twice because the first time didn't quite settle. Because the brain refuses, for a second, to cooperate. Only later did the official statement arrive. Measured, controlled, the kind of statement that tries to hold grief upright so it doesn't collapse in public. We are deeply saddened to announce that our beloved Ian von Memerty passed away at the age of 61 in Johannesburg in the early hours of February 23rd, 2026. As a family, we have done everything we could to love and respect him throughout his journey. We ask for privacy and respect as we face the pain of losing someone so dear to us. That was it. No dramatic language, no elaborate explanation. Just a few sentences that felt too small for a life that had taken up so much space. The early hours, that detail lingers. There's something about early hours that makes it heavier. It suggests a room dimly lit. A clock ticking too loudly. Someone watching, waiting, maybe counting breaths without meaning to. It suggests the world outside continuing. Security guards changing shifts. Bakers beginning their first batches of bread. While inside, something stops. 61. Not an age that feels finished. Not an age that sounds like goodbye. It sits there awkwardly, unfinished, like a sentence that never found its period. Johannesburg woke up slowly that morning. The light crept over rooftops, as it always does. Coffee machines hissed. Radios clicked on. And then the name began to be spoken out loud. Ian von Memerty. For some, it was a voice they had grown up hearing. For others, a face tied to a certain era, a certain energy, a kind of presence that felt both theatrical and strangely intimate. He had always seemed larger than the room, and yet entirely at ease inside it. That rare mix. Now the room felt different. It's strange how quickly language turns formal when someone dies. Passed away. Beloved. Journey. Words that smooth the edges. Words that try to make the sharpness manageable. But underneath them, the raw fact remains. He was there. And then he wasn't. Somewhere in the city, curtains were still drawn when the news arrived. Somewhere else, someone stared at their phone for a long time before putting it face down on the table. Not because they didn't believe it, because they did. The statement asked for privacy. And that request says more than people think. It hints at hospital corridors, at conversations held in low voices, at decisions that had already been made before the world knew it needed to prepare. As a family, we have done everything we could to love and respect him throughout his journey. That line doesn't explain anything, and maybe that's the point. It doesn't list battles fought. It doesn't detail the nights that stretched too long. It simply says, we were there. We loved him. We stayed. Sometimes that's all that can be said without breaking. By mid-morning, tributes began to appear. Not polished essays, just fragments, old photographs, a clip from a performance, a memory about laughter backstage, about his timing, about the way he could fill a space without seeming to try. But grief online is odd. It scrolls past wedding photos and lunch plans. It competes with advertisements. It sits there, sandwiched between ordinary life. And still, it felt like something had shifted. There's always that moment, brief but unmistakable, when you realize a voice you thought would always be somewhere in the background has gone quiet. Not fading, not distant, just quiet. Johannesburg, fully awake now, carried on. Taxis moved. Offices opened. The sky cleared into a bright, indifferent blue. Yet for those who had known him, personally or from afar, the day moved differently. Slower in places, heavier in others. The official words remained the same. They didn't expand. They didn't clarify. They didn't try to wrap the loss in neat meaning. And maybe that restraint is honest. Maybe anything more would have felt rehearsed. He died in the early hours of February 23, 2026, a date that will now be circled quietly on calendars, a time that will return each year before dawn, when the city is still dark and the world feels suspended between yesterday and whatever comes next. No grand finale, no orchestrated farewell, just a phone vibrating on a bedside table, a lamp left on too long, and a name that, by morning, everyone was saying carefully, as if speaking it too loudly might disturb something that had only just gone still. By noon, the statement had settled into every corner of the internet. It was copied, shared, reposted without commentary, as if people were afraid that adding their own words would somehow disturb it. And then, there it was again, clear, untouched, almost fragile in its formality. We are deeply saddened to announce that our dear Ian von Memerty passed away at the age of 61 in Johannesburg on the morning of February the 23rd, 2026. As a family, we have done everything we could to love and respect him throughout his life. We request privacy and respect during this time as we face the grief of losing a loved one. No embellishment, no adjectives added by outsiders, no reinterpretation. Just that, nothing more. For a while, the words seemed to float on their own, heavy and strangely contained. People read them the way you read something official and irreversible, slowly, as if pacing matters, as if punctuation matters. There is a particular stillness that comes after a statement like that. It doesn't shout, it doesn't demand reaction, it simply exists, and in existing, it changes the room. You can almost imagine the moment it was drafted. A table, maybe 2 or 3 people sitting around it. A phone placed face down. Someone suggesting a different phrasing, then shaking their head. No, keep it simple. Keep it clean. Don't make it theatrical. He wouldn't have wanted that. So it stayed formal, almost restrained. Outside, the city kept moving. Johannesburg does not pause for anyone. Traffic lights switched from red to green without ceremony. Delivery trucks reversed into loading bays. Somewhere, a radio host cleared his throat before saying the name aloud for the first time that morning. Ian von Memerty. Saying it feels different now. There's a past tense hovering around it, even when no one uses it explicitly. What the statement doesn't mention is the texture of those early hours. It doesn't describe the air in the room. It doesn't tell us who was holding his hand, or if anyone was. It doesn't say whether there were final words, or whether silence did the talking. It just draws a line. Before, after. That's what official announcements do. They create a clean edge where, in reality, there was probably nothing clean about it. Grief is rarely symmetrical. It spills. It stumbles. It contradicts itself. But the statement doesn't show that. It stands upright, composed, like someone straightening their jacket before facing the world. As a family, we have done everything we could to love and respect him throughout his journey. That sentence sits there with quiet weight. It doesn't list hospital visits. It doesn't mention exhaustion. It doesn't explain what journey means. Illness? Struggle? something slower, more private. It leaves it unsaid. And sometimes what is unsaid is louder. There's a moment, always a moment, when news like this stops being abstract and becomes personal. When someone remembers a specific performance, a specific laugh, a time they met him briefly and were surprised by how real he seemed. Not distant, not untouchable, real. 61 is an age that still carries plans, future dates, projects not yet started, conversations not yet finished. It doesn't feel like a number that belongs in a formal announcement. And yet, there it is. The early hours of February 23rd. If you were awake at that time, you didn't know. You were brushing your teeth, scrolling mindlessly, maybe staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. The world felt ordinary. And somewhere in that same city, something irreversible had already happened. There's something unsettling about that overlap. Your ordinary moment, someone else's final one. By late afternoon, tributes began to stretch longer. Colleagues recalling stories, old collaborators sharing photographs that felt suddenly sacred. The kind of images you didn't realize would one day become memorial pieces. But the original statement remained the anchor. People returned to it, quoted it exactly. No paraphrasing, because paraphrasing feels risky when it comes to death. And then the request? We ask for privacy and respect. It's a gentle sentence, but firm. It suggests doors closing, curtains drawn, phones silenced. It suggests a family stepping away from the noise while the rest of the world leans in. There's something honest about that boundary. A reminder that no matter how public a life may have been, the ending is almost always private. Even now, as the city slides toward evening, the light changing from gold to something cooler, the words remain unchanged. They don't soften. They don't expand. They don't try to make sense of anything. They simply state. And in stating, they leave a space behind them. A space where explanations could be, a space where questions hover, but don't land. A space that feels deliberate. No additional clarification has come. No timeline filled in. No dramatic recounting of final hours. Just the statement, standing on its own, like a quiet marker placed carefully on the ground. People keep reading it, maybe hoping that on the third or fourth reading, something different will appear between the lines. It doesn't. The city grows darker again. Streetlights flicker on. Windows glow from within. Somewhere, someone scrolls back up to the beginning of the statement and reads it once more, slower this time. And then they put the phone down, not because there is nothing left to say, because the words have already said enough. The statement keeps using the word family. As a family, we have done everything we could. It's easy to read past that line. It sounds formal, predictable. The kind of sentence that belongs in public grief. But if you slow down, it opens. Because before he was a name shared across timelines, before he was a headline spoken carefully by radio hosts, he was someone inside a house. Someone whose shoes were left near a door. Someone whose mug had a specific place in the cupboard. Family is not a press release. Family is the small things. You imagine a kitchen light left on later than usual. Not for conversation. Just because no one remembered to switch it off. You imagine footsteps softer than before. Voices lowered without anyone agreeing to lower them. There's something about the word journey in that statement. It doesn't say what the journey was. It doesn't map it out. It just acknowledges that there was one. Journeys aren't always dramatic. Sometimes they are made of waiting rooms, of quiet car rides, of long pauses where no one knows what to say. So they say nothing at all. In those last days, however many there were, you can picture the shift. The way a house changes when everyone becomes aware that time is behaving differently. Slower in some ways, faster in others. The way people start memorizing ordinary details without meaning to. The sound of breathing from another room. The rhythm of a clock at 3 a.m. The way a hand feels when you hold it a little tighter than usual. As a family, we have done everything we could to love and respect him throughout his journey. That sentence suggests effort. Not loud effort. Not heroic speeches. Just the kind of steady, unglamorous effort that happens behind closed doors. Sitting beside someone even when there is nothing to fix. Listening to silence without trying to fill it. Respect can look like many things. It can look like stepping back when someone doesn't want to talk. It can look like staying, even when the room feels heavy. It can look like pretending to be stronger than you are so the other person doesn't have to carry your fear. There were probably conversations that never made it outside those walls. Not dramatic confessions. Not cinematic final speeches. Just fragments. Do you need anything? No, I'm fine. Are you sure? Yes. And maybe they both knew that fine meant something else entirely. We don't know the details, and maybe that's right. The statement doesn't offer them. It doesn't say how long the journey was. It doesn't say when it began. It simply implies that there was a path, and that they walked it together. Family means watching someone sleep and counting the rise and fall of their chest without admitting that you're counting. Family means making tea no one drinks. Family means looking at a chair across the room and already feeling its absence before it's empty. Somewhere in Johannesburg, in the early hours of February 23rd, there must have been a moment of stillness that felt different from all the other still moments. A subtle shift. A quiet recognition. No announcement yet. No statement drafted. Just the people closest to him understanding, without words, that something had ended. It's strange how private those seconds are. The world doesn't know. The city doesn't pause. Cars continue driving past. Someone laughs at something trivial in another house down the street. Inside, though, the air changes. Maybe someone reached for his hand. Maybe someone whispered something too soft to ever be repeated. Or maybe there was only silence. Not dramatic silence. Just ordinary, exhausted silence. Love doesn't always look poetic at the end. Sometimes it looks like sitting in a chair for hours because leaving the room feels wrong. Sometimes it looks like staring at a monitor without understanding the numbers. Sometimes it looks like saying nothing because words feel unnecessary. The statement says they did everything they could. That phrase carries both strength and surrender. It suggests effort, and it suggests limits. Everything we could. There's humility in that. An acknowledgement that love is powerful, but not absolute. That devotion can hold someone's hand, but it cannot rewrite time. Imagine the morning after. The house still. The light creeping in through curtains that were never fully closed. Someone making the first phone call. Someone else unable to speak. Handing the phone over. These are the details that never enter public record. The journey is over, the statement implies. But for the family, another one begins. The quiet one. The one where you learn how to move through rooms that feel altered. Where you catch yourself almost calling out to someone before remembering. Grief inside a family is different from grief in public. Public grief is loud. It has tributes. It has commentary. It has shared memories posted with photographs. Private grief is smaller. It sits at the kitchen table. It lingers in hallways. It appears in the middle of the night when the house is too quiet. Ian, in that private space, was not a public figure. He was a voice calling someone's name from another room. He was a presence at dinner. He was part of the rhythm of ordinary days. And then the rhythm changed. No explanation can smooth that. No formal wording can make it symmetrical. The statement remains composed. Dignified, it does not crack. But behind it, you can sense the human layer. The nights that stretched longer than they should have. the careful movements, the way people try to be brave for each other without saying they are trying. The journey. Such a soft word for something that likely carried weight. And now, outside, the world continues to say his name in past tense. Inside, perhaps, they are still getting used to the silence that follows it. Before the early morning phone calls, before the careful wording, before the request for privacy, there was noise, not the soft, respectful kind that follows loss. Real noise, arguments, opinion pieces, studio debates where people lean forward in their chairs and speak over one another. Social media threads that spiraled for hours. Dying for a better life. Dying for a better life. Even the title refused to sit quietly. When the series was announced, some people praised its boldness before a single episode aired. They called it necessary, brave. A confrontation with uncomfortable realities that too many preferred to ignore. They said Ian had always been willing to step into difficult spaces, that this was consistent with a career built on provocation and thought. Supporters argued that the show forced viewers to look at the cracks beneath polished surfaces, that it asked questions others avoided, that art, if it's worth anything, should disturb a little, should unsettle, should press against the easy narratives society tells itself. They said he was holding up a mirror, but mirrors are rarely flattering. Some said it was irresponsible. Some said it was irresponsible. Others said it was exploitative. Words like dangerous began appearing in headlines. Panels were convened. Columns were written. Radio hosts asked callers whether the show had gone too far. Some viewers watched out of curiosity. Some out of outrage. Some refused entirely, claiming the title alone was enough to justify their discomfort. And in the middle of it, there was Ian, public, visible, and yet, in certain moments, strangely silent. He did not immediately rush into defensive interviews. He did not flood timelines with explanations. For a while, he allowed the work to stand there on its own, absorbing the impact. That silence irritated some people. They wanted clarification, an apology, or at least a tidy explanation of intention. Was it meant to provoke, to educate, to shock, to comfort? Silence in a controversy is rarely interpreted kindly. Eventually, when he did speak, measured, composed, he didn't offer grand justifications. He spoke about conversation, about complexity, about refusing to reduce difficult realities into neat, digestible sound bites. He insisted the series was not an endorsement of despair, but an exploration of the pressures that lead people to breaking points. That explanation satisfied some. It angered others further. Because once a narrative splits into two camps, it rarely reunites. On one side, viewers who believed he was courageous enough to risk reputation for the sake of uncomfortable truth. On the other, critics who felt he had misjudged the line between exploration and insensitivity. The debates grew louder than the show itself, and now, only weeks later, the statement asking for privacy sits in stark contrast to that noise. One side of the story is 3 paragraphs long, formal, restrained, requesting space. The other side is sprawling, opinionated, restless. There's something almost jarring about that contrast. A public figure who spent months at the center of heated discourse. And then, suddenly, a quiet notice in the early hours asking the world to step back. It forces an uncomfortable shift. The arguments don't vanish. They linger. Clips from the series still circulate. Think pieces remain archived. The controversy does not dissolve simply because the man at its center is gone. If anything, it becomes more complicated. Supporters now frame the series differently. They call it part of his legacy, a testament to his refusal to avoid difficult terrain. They argue that the backlash proves the work mattered. Critics tread more carefully. Some soften their tone. Others don't. They insist that artistic accountability doesn't disappear with mortality, that the conversations the show sparked still deserve to be had. And somewhere within all that noise is a quieter question. Did he know? Did he understand, as the debates swirled and the headlines sharpened, that those conversations might outlive him? That the series would continue to be dissected, defended, condemned, even in his absence? Public life is strange that way. You create something, you release it, and then it belongs to everyone. Interpretation escapes your control. In the early hours of February 23rd, none of those arguments mattered inside the room where the family stood. There were no hashtags, no panel discussions, no think pieces, just stillness. But outside that room, the world is not still. The same feeds that carried outrage now carry condolences. The same voices that argued about artistic boundaries now speak in softened tones about complexity and impact. It's not hypocrisy. It's just the collision of two truths. A man can be controversial and beloved, provocative and devoted, publicly debated and privately cherished. The official statement remains composed, almost minimal. We ask for privacy and respect. Meanwhile, the public arena remains what it always was, crowded, opinionated, unwilling to lower its volume for long. That tension doesn't resolve neatly. On one side, a family closing doors, drawing curtains, learning how to move through rooms that feel altered. On the other, a society still arguing about a series that refuses to fade quietly. The contrast is sharp, almost uncomfortable, and perhaps the most unsettling thought of all lingers beneath it. When he chose to create Dying for a Better Life, did he imagine the discussions would continue without him? Did he foresee that the work would take on a different weight once his own life had ended? There is no statement addressing that. No clarification tucked between the formal lines. Only the early morning. The quiet announcement. And a body of work still echoing in a world that has not yet decided what to do with it. The city wakes anyway. Alarm clocks ring. Coffee drips into mugs. A bus exhales at the corner of a busy street. Nothing in the sky signals that anything has shifted. But somewhere between the first light and the first headline, something has gone quiet. A voice that used to fill rooms. A laugh that used to arrive before the joke was finished. A presence that made silence feel intentional, not accidental. Now just air. No grand language fits here. The statement already said what it needed to say. It stands there, formal and still, like a closed door. Outside that door, life keeps moving. A studio sits empty for a moment longer than usual. A chair slightly turned away from the desk. A script left where someone last placed it. Margins marked in ink. No one has cleared it yet. Dust settles without asking permission. The series that stirred debate continues to stream. Viewers press play. Some out of curiosity. Some because they had meant to watch it and never did. The title flashes across the screen again. Dying for a Better Life. The words look different now. Not heavier. Just different. Somewhere, someone pauses the episode midway. Not because of outrage. Not because of agreement. Just because the timing feels strange. There are no conclusions waiting here. No tidy reconciliation between admiration and criticism. The arguments about the show do not vanish. They simply lower their volume for a moment, as if unsure of their footing. In a house in Johannesburg, a window is opened. Fresh air moves through rooms that feel unfamiliar. Not because the furniture has changed, because the space between things has. A jacket still hangs where it was left. A pair of glasses rests on a table. A message thread remains unanswered. Objects don't understand absence, they remain loyal to routine. The public remembers him in fragments. A clip shared again. A photograph from years ago. A memory retold slightly differently each time. Stories overlap. They contradict. They soften. No single version settles. Inside the family circle, grief does not perform. It doesn't summarize. It doesn't attempt to balance praise with critique. It just sits. Sometimes in the middle of the day, sometimes at 3 in the morning. The official words asked for privacy. That request feels louder now. Because outside, the world is already moving on to the next headline. Another debate. Another name. Attention is restless. But there are smaller moments that linger. A radio host hesitates before introducing an old recording. A stage light flickers on for rehearsal and then off again. A dressing room mirror reflects an empty doorway. No speeches, no dramatic crescendos. Just spaces that used to be occupied. The controversy around the series continues, but in a different tone. Some speak more carefully, others do not. Opinions remain where they were, only slightly rearranged by circumstance. Art doesn't disappear when the artist does. It keeps breathing on its own, and that can feel unsettling. Did he anticipate that? The way conversations would stretch beyond him? The way his work would stand in rooms where he no longer could? There is no answer offered. Only the city, Johannesburg at dusk. Streetlights blinking on one by one. Cars moving in steady lines. Somewhere, a television screen goes dark. Somewhere else, it lights up. A family gathers in a room without speaking much. The quiet isn't dramatic. It's ordinary. Familiar in a way no one wanted to become familiar with. A phone vibrates again. Condolences arriving in waves. Messages that begin with, "I can't believe," and end without knowing how to finish. They read some. They leave others unopened. The house settles into night. Outside, the debates resume their rhythm. Panels, columns, think pieces. The series dissected again from a new angle. The man at the center now unreachable. The contrast remains. A short statement asking for space. A loud world reluctant to grant it. And in between, a city breathing. Morning turning into afternoon. Afternoon folding into evening. His name spoken softly in one room, firmly in another. No moral drawn, no lesson extracted. Just this. The city still wakes. The screens still glow. But one voice will not answer. By evening, the words had circled the world and come back again. Shared. Translated. Copied into captions and headlines. But they always return to the same line. We wish to maintain privacy and respect during this time as we grapple with the pain of losing a loved one. The sentence feels simple, almost gentle. It does not argue. It does not defend. It does not expand. It asks, and asking in a moment like this feels heavier than declaring. Privacy, such a quiet word in a loud world. Because outside that request, the noise does not fully stop. It dims, maybe, softens, but it continues. Discussions about the series resurface. Old interviews are replayed. Headlines from weeks ago are pulled back into view, re-examined through the lens of this new absence. Some viewers say they see the work differently now. Others insist they don't. Nothing is neatly resolved. And yet, somewhere beyond the debates, beyond the analysis, beyond the scrolling feeds, there is a house where none of that matters tonight. A hallway with the lights left low. A table cleared but not fully wiped. Curtains drawn halfway, as if unsure whether to open or close. Grief does not perform for cameras. It moves slowly through rooms, brushing past door frames, settling in corners. It sits beside people without announcing itself. In the early hours of that morning, before statements and speculation, there must have been a moment when time felt suspended. No commentary, no public reaction, just breathing, then not. That is the part the world never sees. The series continues to stream. The title appears on screens again and again. Dying for a better life. The irony of it hangs in the air. unspoken. Somewhere, a viewer pauses at the opening credits and stares at the name in the corner of the screen. Ian von Memerty. It lingers for a second longer than usual, not because anyone tells it to, because something inside the viewer resists pressing play. Outside, traffic flows along familiar routes. The city does not hesitate at intersections. Office towers glow in the dark. Late-night conversations drift from open windows. Life moves in straight lines. Inside one closed space, it does not. The request for privacy stands there, steady. Not defensive. Not dramatic. Just firm in its quietness. We wish to maintain our privacy. You can almost hear the fatigue beneath it. Not exhaustion from controversy. Not weariness from public life. A deeper tiredness. The kind that follows long days and longer nights. The kind that does not seek attention. No one outside knows the exact details of those final hours. And maybe that is the point. There is dignity in what is withheld. The public remembers a figure who sparked debate, who stood in the center of conversation without always stepping aside. A man who allowed complexity to exist without smoothing it over. The family remembers something else entirely. A voice calling from another room. A familiar footstep. A way of clearing his throat before speaking. Two versions of the same person, neither canceling the other. The contrast remains sharp. On one side, archived footage, streaming platforms, opinion pieces still arguing about intention. On the other, a quiet request for space. The city shifts toward morning again. Johannesburg lightens slowly, as it always does. Pale blue pressing against the edges of night. Rooftops catching the first touch of sun. A newspaper lands against a front gate. A dog barks once, then stops. A kettle clicks on in a neighboring house, and somewhere, a door remains closed, curtains unmoved. Inside, no cameras, no headlines, only stillness. The sunlight reaches the windows but does not cross the threshold. The city brightens. That one room does not.